somebody attending by Zoom?
Rodney from ADG.
Okay, great.
Or if it requires you to allow them to talk.
I-
Declined to be promoted.
He's a he.
Not before.
I'm good.
I think we're on that.
It's being held
Oh, there's-
back.
there's
Held
Rodney.
back at grade?
That's right. All right, we're good.
There he is.
Certainly Rodney.
Okay. Welcome, everybody, to the October 1st, 2025 meeting of the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Committee on the Municipal Building. Just through the roll. Member O'Leary.
Here.
Member Horak is absent. Member Weeks.
Here.
Mary Lou McElwain. Chilman. Here. Renee Plummer.
Here.
Councilor Cook.
Here.
And we also have from city staff, the Chief of Police, Mark Newport. Police Commissioner Buzz Scher.
I am the formal replacement for Police Commissioner Coyle.
Okay.
Seemed to make sense since she's not running for office.
Okay, so that's, you're representing our police commission, and from city staff, we have Carl Beverly and Peter Rice, Natalie Attired, as well as Joe Almeida. And,
No, it's Natalie Attired.
That's okay. Richard Martin, JSA.
Richard Martz from JSA.
You just wait till next meeting.
We had minutes from our last meeting. Has everyone had a chance to read them?
Will we approve?
Is there a second?
I'll second, but there's one amendment on page 4 or 5, number 3. And it probably is how I said it. It should be 10 to 12,000 square footage.
Well, that's a big difference, Pete.
I did notice that. Okay. I take it the committee agrees with that?
Move is amended.
I thought you asked 10 to 12 feet.
I'd also, that wouldn't hold you, Chief.
I'd also point out that I mentioned last meeting, I'm actually now a member of the committee rather than a member of the staff as it's identified in the minutes.
Okay, yes. So you're an elected representative. Any other changes? So, maker of the motion, accept. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. Next up, we gave you some homework. Friends at JSA have been working on reconciling the matrix report with the ADG spatial analysis. Should we turn that over to you?
Fair enough.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Marks.
So we've been, main point of our focus the past couple weeks has been working through the police department's space needs assessment, reconciling the differences between the matrix and the ADG, and coming to some consensus. We provided a memo outlining some of the key points we wanted to highlight, which I'll just sort of briefly summarize, and then a few sort of the next steps and potentials. When we look through the report, a couple points to make were there were a few departments or spaces, roughly 21,000 square feet or so, that were not accounted for in the matrix report. Those are spaces that in our review with the police department are part of the program now and would remain a part. 2,100 approximately.
You said 21,000, that's why.
21,000.
Zeros, past the zeros.
Still, we're having trouble with these decimal points.
This would include records in courts, auxiliary. In addition, there is just a little over 1,000 square feet of spaces that they matrix and noted in the report that they did not include. But in our reviews and discussions, we feel those spaces are warranted and needed and would stand by including those in the space needs assessment. Lastly was mechanical MEP type spaces. Those are spaces that are crucial to the building. Obviously, those were not accounted for in the original matrix report. Those are accounted for in our space needs assessment, and we would again stand by that we would definitely need those spaces. Now, whether those fully remain shared, just PD, those are more than likely shared spaces through the campus. If we're building a new mechanical room or a new electrical room, more than likely that is a shared infrastructure element, but it is something that will be needed. Given those spaces, the differences between where AD numbers currently stands and sort of the matrix numbers more in this range of 7,000 to 8,000 square feet. It's important to note that of the difference, there's about 4,000 square feet that we've identified today, 4,050 that we've identified today that we would consider shared spaces between, if this were a standalone facility, which it is not, or if we weren't touching anything on the city side, we would need those spaces for the police function, or at least that is our opinion. However, because we are working as a campus as a whole, we have the ability to share those spaces, find efficiencies. The primary driver of that being the sort of multi-purpose training room. Police department will not need that all the time, but there are times they will need it, whether it's half of the room, some of the room. And on the same side, I'm guessing that the city will always need more conference space, both for public functions and for city working purposes. So that is in sort of easy synergy where we can find efficiencies and everyone wins. I think just at a brief level, that hits sort of the high points as we outlined. Mo. It's important to note that as we stated before, as we get into the existing building and we lay spaces out, those numbers are plus and minus. They're going to fluctuate some as we work around inefficiencies of structure, inefficiencies of spaces that we do or don't want to touch. And that as we work through the city programming side of things, we might find that we can bring the amount of new construction down or bring it up depending on how much we do or don't want to impact spaces. So that's why when we look at doing multiple options, one of those options might be more minimally touching the city side in terms of, reorganizing. And that means we need to do more new construction, or we might be able to reduce that number down by doing more internal work. There's possibilities, and that's why we're here. Anything else you guys want to add, just at a high level?
Perhaps walk through just the attachments so that they, for orienting them.
So
And the purpose of that document, why we thought we needed to create this document when you walked them through it.
So the second page of the attachments that we provided you is the reconciled space needs assessment summary. Think of this as our overall master planning square footage sheet. It's the one more page, Renee. Just one more page. This spreadsheet. This guy. I guess it's the third sheet if you didn't print
Okay.
on the side.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's what I was looking at. Okay.
Keep going.
The other second page.
So what we wanted to accomplish here was showing it clear what is existing to date, what we are proposing new, and how those have changed. So to date, the police department is just under 40,000 square feet of space. What we are proposing that it would need is 47,036, about a 7,000 square foot change. Then at this date and time, about 4,000 square feet of shared space, 4,050. That number may change as we work through the city side and we can find more efficiencies, more shared possibilities. And then there's the municipal side of things. To date, we know that of the campus, it's about 66,683 square feet. What we think the city needs in the future is what we're working on right now. And so that's the next step in this process, is the city's space needs assessment.
Do you feel confident the total, you've measured the total building then?
Yes. We've done those takeoffs. Those are based off of inside of exterior wall dimensions, which is how building code does it. If you were going outside of wall, the number's going to look slightly different.
Right.
But that number is accurate to the CAD backgrounds that we have. We haven't done field measurements or laser scanning of the whole building to date.
You
but-
took it from old documents then?
No, we have CAD files of the campus that we can measure from. Now, when we get to actual
Computer aided design,
yes,
is what he's saying. It's,
those takeoffs are accurate to, you know, plus or minus, unless a wall was built in a slightly different place.
I mean, that, you know, like that column makes a big difference when you're talking about square footage in a
So
room.
we're talking gross square feet right now, so that's
Yeah,
inclusive
okay.
of columns, shafts, elevators, usable and unusable, and that's where sort of the efficiency factors come into it versus net square feet. But you're exactly right, if we have a column in the middle of an office, well, that office is gonna have to get bigger because you're working around a rather sizable column. And that's where the sort of plus and minuses come in. An office might need to be 150 square feet, but when you account for the column that's there and the spaces we're working around, it might end up having to be 200 gross to get that net where we need it.
So what we want the committee to believe and understand is that there was a method to all of this. We don't want to find ourselves 2-3 months from now still talking about square footage. We're trying to put it on the sheet and say, okay, do we all agree and believe that this is the square footage of existing space, and how it's used, so we can move forward to the next step. There are several ways to measure existing square footage. There's condominium documents, as you know, but we all believe that these are accurate numbers of the gross square footage that's being used by City Hall and PD right now, as we speak.
We'll put that in the minutes according to Joel.
Excellent, thank you.
okay. John?
Yeah, a couple of points. First of all, this was wonderfully put together, very simple to understand, and I thank you for that. I think that there's a couple of things in here that, you know, as far as you've got the numbers in here, I think probably one of the most important statements is near the end where it says, as noted, there are inefficiencies when repurposing building space that may be altered, you know. And again, that's one of the things that, you know, when somebody, we've been through, when you start with a clean slate, you can do things much more efficiently than you can when you're into an existing building. The other thing, when you start talking about spatial, et cetera, I mean, I've said this before, but I'll say it again, and the fact is that when we moved from Daniel Street up to here, bottom line is we tried to do things very efficiently and as frankly cheaply as possible. So over here, you either got one hospital room or 2 hospital rooms. It wasn't designed based on your needs. It was based on the fact is we didn't want to have to incur the expenses of putting up additional walls. So that's why going through this process, again, 30 some odd years later, is very beneficial because what was designed back then was designed with a specific purpose in mind to do it as cost effectively as possible. So you've got that and also changes in time and demands of spatial needs for the various departments. So this is an excellent process to go through at this point in time, so thank you.
Okay, let's open it up. Rick?
That was not a drug deal. All right, I know I'm thinking a lot of dollars going, no, sorry, just wanted to say it, okay.
I'll represent you.
Thank you. All right, sorry.
I'm just curious, how much of the difference between the prior study and what you're coming up with was based on difference in measurement from the drawings that they used versus the ones you used, as opposed to space that you found was needed? You noted on second to last paragraph that there was some square footage differences. Was that just a de minimis difference, or was that more significant?
Are you talking about between the smaller rooms, like
Yeah,
offices, storage rooms, things like that?
that's what you said, but I'm curious, did you find other differences? Were they using less accurate drawings?
Well, their numbers aren't based, so a matrix, when they do their calculations, isn't based off of drawings. They're not saying, okay, we have 120 square feet in a column here. They're doing purely a math-based exercise. So saying, okay, we need
It was a
100.
greenfield, it was a greenfields type of
120
approach.
square feet.
I get that, so then what were the differences that you found in the small rooms?
In the small rooms, it would be things like take a storage room. They showed a number of storage rooms at 80 square feet. EDG's typical practice that has a logic to it is making those 100, 120 square feet. The logic being that in the future, if you need to convert it into an office, it's easy to do so, whereas 80 square feet is a little small for an office. That doesn't mean we have to make the storage room that large, but there's future flexibility in that. That's a good example of one of those. Sometimes,
How much of the square footage did that come to roughly?
you know, I'd have to compare the exact number to give you a straight answer.
More than 1,000, more than 2,000?
Imagine that's probably in that maybe one to 2,000 range. That's, you take 50 square feet difference between those small rooms times 20 storage rooms more, that adds up.
That's what I
Now,
was
is it
asking.
all that difference? No, but it's a chunk.
Mary Lou and then Peter.
Yes, on page 3, the needed square feet, does that refer to 2044? We were just referring to that main building square footages. So when you
Yes.
say that needed square feet, is that extended out to 2044?
Correct, that's the 2044.
Yeah, 20 years. Thank you.
Correct.
Peter?
Yeah, on the fleet square footage, the increase of 7,000 square feet, has that been ascertained in a certain way, or?
Rodney, please chime in if I say something incorrectly or out of hand, but the square footage that is proposed in the space needs assessment lays out all those individual spaces that would be contained in that new fleet building. And those are all spaces that were discussed with the PD early on and felt beneficial and, you know, preferable to have in the program. Whereas right now, the current fleet building, which is much smaller, is not an ideal situation at all. Not enough space to do a lot of things. It's fairly inefficient from an operations standpoint. Rodney, would you add anything further to that?
I don't think so, not unless there are any specific questions. I think the main difference in the two is looking at what a police department needs and the type of spaces, and then making those spaces as efficient as possible and as flexible as possible for future growth. We went through the matrix report with the chief, and we cross-referenced the ADG report, and when we got through it, it was determined that the matrix report is valuable in that it really outlined the staffing needs of a police department based on the size of Portsmouth and how Portsmouth will grow over the next, couple decades. And so we took that information and made any modifications to the ADG report, which I think ended up adding a couple people that Chief had said, yes, those would be good adds, and that those are things that we should have in the report. But those spaces, I have to agree with Richard. The spaces are somewhat negligent when you look at the differences between the two reports.
Well, this is 7,000 square feet. That's not negligent.
But it's not just that one factor. It's like Richard
Well,
had said.
that's what the line
You're
says.
talking about the fleet building specifically.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't have what you're looking at. I don't know. I'm sorry.
He's looking at Rodney, the proposed fleet building compared to the existing is a 7,000 square foot growth. That's
Right. That's what, based on the assets that the police department has, that's how large we thought the building should be. And we stand behind that because it was based on the absolute information that we were given, though we know that we're not expanding the fleet capability, so we brought it back down to the other number. Is that what you're talking about, Richard?
they're sort of.
Yeah.
I think to your point.
Okay.
One of the things I want to make sure of, is that there's a big difference between needs and wants. And, all of those have to do with the final number. So, when I see a 4 times larger fleet area than they have now, then it raises a question.
That's fair enough.
So I think to clarify that, it could be what makes up that 8,800 square feet. But for example, our garage now is full with the vehicles that we have in there. We have no garage space to process vehicles or evidence, which we would need moving forward. So that's a piece of why we need to expand the garage. We have a lot of equipment and technology that needs to be in air conditioned space that we don't have now. So now when we have to bring a vehicle in there that needs to be processed, we have to take those vehicles out, leave them out in the weather, which could damage some of the equipment that's on those vehicles.
Yes, Counselor.
Yeah, I want to follow up. Can I follow up on a question on that? Because I just want to know if that's included, the Fleet Street expansion includes the 2 Sally Ports, the crime scene bay, and the vehicle evidence bay. Because those are 4 additions, 4 bays, vehicle bay additions that are in the regular planning under patrol and detectives. And so I was trying to figure out, where are those going in the Fleet Street facility? Is that why we're increasing it by 7,000 square feet?
Not Fleet Street,
not
the
Fleet
Fleet
Street.
building.
Fleet building,
Fleet
sorry.
building.
You know what I'm saying.
It's called
Behind us.
Sally.
The
So-
Sally building.
Well, so Sally,
That's
so Sally Port is a different, so Sally Port is part of the main building. Yes, but
The
the,
building's a separate building out.
yeah,
The
it's,
barn in the back.
So if I could just ask for clarification, it was my understanding, and I have to say that, I stepped back a little bit in my role, but it's my understanding that the 47 did not include the fleet maintenance.
correct, that is carried as a
So
separate
what's
line item.
important to look at is, on the additional attachment, the ADG original recommendation was 51,000 square feet, and it's now down to 47,000 square feet. And of that additional 7,200, 4,000 of that is shared. So you're looking at roughly a 3,000 square foot increase. So I understand the concern about increasing spaces, but there was a reduction from what was originally recommended as a result of this exercise. So I think that's an important thing to note.
Can I follow up with another question? So I'm confused. So we're expanding the fleet facility,
You would propose to.
proposed to, and then we're also adding 2 Sally Ports, a crime scene bay, and an evidence bay, a vehicle evidence bay. Is that accurate?
So, and again, for clarification, I think the fleet building was for information. It was not intended to be part of this scope of work that we're moving forward with. It's more
So it's below the line.
It's below the line.
below the
It's
foot.
like, hey, if we were gonna be doing this, this is a need, we would be, but it was not included
The main building.
previously as part of the project, and
Right.
it's identified as a future need more so than anything else. If we're looking at a comprehensive evaluation of all the needs, that's the intent here, is to look at all the things. In an ideal world, they would have that additional resource space, but we know we don't have all the monies to do all this.
Okay, wait a minute, he just answered it, because I was gonna say, future need, it would be ridiculous for you to go ahead and go through all of this, and then 2 years from now saying, oh, we need something else, because the price will go up and everything, but you said, all according to the price. Okay.
To follow up again on that point, something that we've seen a lot at the planning board lately, and I know this is more expensive, but just as a question, because the land area out there is sort of small. Have you considered going up? Is there a possibility that you could use lifts to have stacking of some vehicles at some time, or is that just nuts?
I think that'd be great. I don't think we
We haven't
done anything more than just.
working with the building more so than worried about the fleet section right now. So
But it's a great possibility.
Good point, very good point. I think the exercise was to identify the need, so it wasn't forgotten as we focus on this building. But since it's a separate building, we We just wanted to have it on the list of, there's a future need here. However we solve that,
It's called planning.
it'd be great. But we wanted to make sure it was accounted for in this as we focus on this main building.
Can I ask then about, we don't have any of these things now that I'm asking about, these 4 vehicle bays that essentially we're asking to build.
We have our garage out back now that has 4 bays, like 3 bays.
I think she's asking about in the main.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
talking
not-
about in the main building, the additions, 2 Sally ports, the crime scene bay and the vehicle evidence bay.
We don't have any of that. We have a Sally port that goes to the jail, to where the jail cells are.
Okay,
We have a 1 vehicle bay within the building.
okay. So we're talking about really just adding 2 and repurposing or changing, essentially changing function of the 2 we have or replacing them and then adding 2 more? Are we finding that, that they're not enough, currently? As far as like the two bays we currently have aren't adequate to meet our needs?
I'm a little confused with, so what we have right now and the reconfiguration of how the building was designed would have to be, they'd be moved to a different location. And actually, part of those buildings would then come into the processing bay, maybe another storage bay for some certain purposes. So we'd probably be building 2 extra spaces in addition to the 2 spaces that we currently have.
Okay. Well, and I think what I'm asking is we're asking for 2 Sally ports. Do we currently find that the 1 Sally port we have is busy and we need a second one?
I think where it says 2 Sally ports is a Sally port that can hold 2 vehicles.
Okay.
Not more, so like 2 separate Sally ports. The models now in a MARTA facility is a drive-through Sally port. You can get multiple cars in, we can drive in one way and out the other, which if we were on this as designed previously, we couldn't accomplish.
Yeah, I'm just trying to ascertain whether or not we are at capacity, like if we've hit a point where we are beyond the capacity of that space now and we need a second space, or that's what I'm trying to determine, because it seems like when I'm reading it, I'm like, we're going from kind of nothing to a lot. So especially if we consider a future proposal for the fleet space, it seems like we're going from very little to a whole lot. And so I'm trying to figure out really what is the actual need there, versus some future planning that maybe we can't predict. I mean, I like the 20-year planning, but it's really hard to predict what policing looks like in 20 years.
If I could, these are just general numbers at this time. We haven't done the design yet, so we're not to a point where we're saying this is exactly what's going to happen. From an operational standpoint, I'm not going to second guess what the police officers need, but I can imagine having a redundant bay as being pretty vital to an operation. So, I don't, when they say, having a second, that makes sense to me. But we still haven't done the design. So if that was a make or break issue, we'd have to, go to the chief and say, can you get by with just 1? Because it going to 2 forces a cascading effect in terms of costs and other things that, will not allow us to accomplish our goal. But at this point, really these numbers intended to be, this is where we're at right now. And depending upon the design, because, the design process, it's gonna go like this, it's gonna get bigger, it's gonna get smaller, and we're gonna go back and forth through iterations. And it's important to just realize this is one data point in that timeline. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to nail down and not go back to that, well, Matrix always says this, ADG always says this. We just say, okay, we took the 2 together, and this is where we're at this moment.
Rick?
We know, thank you, Peter. We know approximately how much space is needed, approximately. And as you say, it's going to go back and forth. At some point, there'll be a prioritization of space needs. So you come to a point where we've come up with a building of X number of square feet, and it does or doesn't have 2 bays or 3 bays. Maybe you find a way that it gets 3 bays and the budget works. Those are the sorts of things that happen in the design process. But the prioritization, you're not there yet, right? You haven't prioritized, we absolutely have to have that 35 square foot storage space because it might be an office because of this location of the building versus one over on, no windows, we'll never have windows because it's underground. Maybe we don't need to allocate that to be a future office space, that sort of thing. I'm taking an extreme example, but when do you think we might get to that of having some sort of prioritization? What would it mean to be making these decisions? To give you input to make decisions, we don't make the decision.
Well, if I could, first, I would say we really need to get to a place where this committee feels as though what we're putting in front of you has been filtered, thoroughly filtered, and is believable and real. That we have to get there first.
And what Joe's referring to is that, we need to look at the other side of the coin, where we gotta look at the municipal functions
Right.
as well.
So,
It's the same thing there, same prioritization needs there.
Yep.
And where does the school fit in there is like one kind of a big elephant in the room issue with that topic.
And then John.
I think part of the difficult process when we get to the prioritization perspective is selling out the future for the present. And that,
I'm not suggesting that.
No, I'm not suggesting you are suggesting that. In the work I did when the law school in Concord was expanding, we made some decisions about prioritizing certain things because of we just need this right now, we're running into problems now because we've got a much bigger group of students coming in than we used to have come in. And I think we always have to think about this as at least a 20-year building, a 2044 building, and not just do we need it now and can we cut it off at what we need now. I just want to keep that thought process in mind that the future really matters. Otherwise, some other blue ribbon committee and some other city council and some other police commission is going to be spending a lot more money if we have to do an add-on.
So, but your question was, when will we be seeing that type of prioritization exercise? And I don't know, that's the consultant's, timeline and, starting to pull those things together, so.
Yep, John?
Yeah, I think that, as far as what Joe said originally, our purpose right now is to take multiple reports, try to put them together, and come up with something that we're comfortable with, as opposed to having two different sets. So, and I'll turn this to Richard, walk through it, once we get this part done, which is the police, then we have to do on the municipal side a similar type function. And then we have to, as a group, come to an understanding of the scope, the size of the entire project. And then, getting back to what Peter said, that's when we start dealing with some of the intricacies. For instance, let's stick with the Sallyport for a second. We may find that, yes, whether we have this size or this size, frankly, may be contingent upon what we find and the topography out there. That may impact, what we end up doing because it doesn't fit. Or, picking up on what Rick said, we may have to find an ingenious way to make it work, because of the topography or something like that. So can you, Richard, just kind of walk through the steps that we're going to be following to get to what Rick was talking about as far as when we start getting specifics for this site, this process, and, this program?
Yes. So
Is that fair?
I think it's a very fair question. So we're at a point with the police department side. On the city side, we are meeting with departments right now. We had a meeting with the department heads last week. We had our first meeting this morning, and we have roughly 4 a week for the next 3.5 weeks or so. couple more to schedule. That'll probably take about 2 rounds. It's gonna take us about a month or 2 to work through to where we get to the point that we have this for the city side and we say, we feel comfortable about this. We feel we're aligned on what those departments need ideally. So then we can start laying those out and making those.
Can I interrupt just for a quick second to
Of course.
pick up what Rick said? With the municipal side, the city side,
Yes.
my understanding is that the manager is including the school department on the municipal side as far as making those determinations. Is that fair?
That's correct.
So, you know, it's not sitting out there as a third entity. It's incorporated in the municipal side. Is that correct?
Correct. We have a meeting scheduled with the school department in, I believe it's 2 weeks. It's the second 2 weeks or 3. It's the week before the last round of them.
Renee?
And I'm sorry to do this, I need to go back to the Sally ports because you were right saying, are there 2 Sally ports for 1 car each, or is it 1 for 2 cars? And when you were talking about the topography, when you talk about 2 cars, can it be 1 and 1? Because that will decide on how big it is. It makes sense. So, yeah, I mean, all of a sudden it was an aha moment when you said that, and I thought, well, so, and I'm sorry to do this to you, but it's confusing, even though to you it's not. We're just like, well, how many do you really need? So, how many do you need, Chief?
In our last design, it was a 2-car garage.
Side by side,
Two
and
vehicles.
could it be 1 and 1? Could it be one
I think it
long
would just-
rather than wide?
It would depend on where it is, like in what we had designed previously, that's the way it was gonna fit into the puzzle of everything that we had, but.
And that's what John was just saying about the
So, but
topography.
now when we're talking about doing different things in different parts of the building, it's all dependent on where it is.
And it's topography and also where those functions are within the department.
Right. And I guess my question was, is there room for more efficiency in space use here? Because can you use one of the Sally ports as a crime scene bay when it's not being used for a vehicle? That's kind of what I'm trying to find out is like, what else can we
The Sally Port
look
is
at?
used for one specific purpose, to bring prisoners into the building to get them into the booking processing area where they go into cells. So it could not function for any other purpose, because you never know when prisoners are gonna be coming in and out of it.
I have a question, yeah, that's exactly the question I have around that is, how many prisoners are here on a weekly basis?
Every day.
And how long do we hold them? Because that impacts this whole, the idea, like, I was looking at all the cells and what we need as far as cells and the number of cells and what kind of cells, and I'm like, well, how many juvenile prisoners do we actually have? How many female prisoners do we actually have? How many, like, so we're building for kind of a standard that my question is always, how does that work in Portsmouth? Does Portsmouth really have that many individuals on a regular basis, or individuals that fit this profile on a regular basis, or, so can we get away with one accessible cell that's padded versus 3 different ones, one for males, one's for females, one's for juveniles?
Well, we
You
only
know what I'm
have,
saying?
we have one padded cell, then we'd have a sectioned off area for females and a sectioned off area for males. And if you look in that report, the female cell would also work as a juvenile cell, so
Yes.
we were doing that. So, like now, we have 6 cells, plus we have a huge, call it a drunk tank, but we don't use that anymore, because we don't put prisoners together. We wouldn't need that going forward, so that takes up a whole lot of space that was no longer needed.
Just in that vein, part of the thing that's unpredictable is 8 years ago, the bail laws in New Hampshire changed substantially, and houses of correction were closing wings because less people were coming in. A year ago, the bail laws changed in the other direction, and now more people are coming in that need to be held for an extended period of time, and which means more people coming in and more cells you'll need. So there's a variable there that is not easily predictable, and you need to find a balance between what the minimum is and where it might end up as. And I would predict that the bail laws are going to keep changing, and that's going to go back and forth and back and forth. And so we need to be careful about reading too much into the way things are today, as opposed to the way they were 8 years ago or the way they'll be 5 years from now. That's
I
the
mean,
problem.
times change, like, we used to hold prisoners here overnight. We don't do that anymore. We take prisoners out to the county attorney, out to the county jail. But there could be an incident where we make multiple arrests where 4 or 5 people are getting arrested, and we bring them back here and put them in a cell. We have to have a cell to put them in. You know, that doesn't happen every day, but when it does happen, we have to have the facility to be able to accommodate that. We can't piecemeal people to
Peter,
other.
and then let's get
I
to the
have,
last questions, I
a
think.
follow-up to something that was just said a little while ago by Mr. Rice. We're really looking at 3 areas. We're looking at the municipal, we're looking at police, and we really need to look at school. I don't believe, unless I've missed something, and the making the school part of this complex, that decision hasn't been made yet.
They're here currently, and that was part of the school department is located in this building. That decision was made, I'd say 10 years ago. And that really comes down to looking at the functions and where are people best located, how does it best serve the city's needs? The school department is part of the municipal government. It's not a separate entity like many communities. It is part of our municipal government. So it's currently structured that way for a reason. And, it really comes down to the city manager making a decision on how best to organize things, whether they should be relocated somewhere else. There are other departments here and opportunities here to relocate other folks. So that's part of this exercise that JSA is going through, to identify all these things, what are adjacencies for those groups necessary, and how best to go about doing that. So this was not, I've said this before, Peter, this is not part of the committee's purview in terms of how to structure the city government. It's how do you
It is part of the direction this committee was given.
I respectfully disagree.
Pardon me?
I respectfully disagree.
Well, can we agree that if this committee recommends looking at whether the school department should move back to Little Harbor, we're citizen volunteers, we have the right to do that. That may be rejected.
I think what I'd like to say as a designer, and I think I'd like to hear Richard's take on this. You've listened to the police department, you've come up with a list of space that you believe, in your professional opinion, you've listened to what they think they need. Not what they want necessarily, maybe some of it's want, but you've got to get your arms around that amount of space. And you have to do that for the municipal functions, and you have to do that for the school functions. Now you've got 3 space allocations. Let's see where those space allocations fit. Then it gets into prioritizations and whether or not can that fit in this building. Let's say the ideal, everything fits in this building, and guess what? We can take a whole section of the building off. That's not going to happen, but that was a theoretical possibility. But we're not there yet. So is it fair to say that for the police portion of this, we have what is your professional opinion of a space allocation based on everything you've read, the interviews you've had, and your professional background? Or is it, you're not just acting as a scribe for the police department, correct?
No, and I lean on ADG's experience as
I don't
police
mean to demean the
departments.
police department.
No, I get what
You
you're
hear what I'm saying?
It makes sense to me.
And I lean on ADG's experience as, law enforcement
So-
experts, but yes.
So when we have the 3 elements, then we can talk about here's the,
Yes.
what can things
For
expand
example,
and
just
contract?
and I'll make it quick, but what we talked about earlier, it might be that of the options we look at, it might be that, hey, we can accomplish minimizing new construction and not impacting X, Y, and Z if we do this and this, but by doing that, we will have to move X department offsite because we need to free up square footage. those are trade-offs, and that's why we look at multiple options or we say, you know what, we want to minimize impact in this part of the building, this is working well, but because of that, we need to do X and Y. We need to wrap our, like you said, we need to wrap our heads around the city needs so that then we can start to lay out, play Tetris and figure out how to make it work. And then the city can make decisions on, yes, this is in our best interest, or no, it isn't.
And all of these will have price tags on.
Exactly.
Yeah, Counselor.
My other question,
Peter, come in, let Counselor speak.
Can I just say something really quickly? I think that it's important to remember that the reason this committee was established is the council wasn't ready to move forward with ADG's recommendations. And so I'm uncomfortable with this, that we've moved back towards more square footage. When Matrix took us down in square footage, I thought we were getting closer to a project that was potentially approvable. And now I feel like we're moving back in a direction where we might have a project that the council might not approve of. So this is my concern, is that going on ADG's recommendations, we might not be going in the right direction. So.
Right.
And on that, my question to you is the influence of AI. I know, you have to say it because you'll have these big areas that they don't need anymore because AI. What is it that AI has done to influence not you, Chief, but a police department? We have to almost look through that looking glass and say, okay, what's going to happen 4-6 years from now, where now you might be reducing the amount that's needed. I hate AI, but when you're talking about office space, why are you smiling?
I don't think AI is going to have any impact on the amount of space we need, because AI is just going to be an algorithm that tells you how to help you solve a crime.
Yeah, no. But I'm just saying, not for the police work, but I'm talking about the back work, the office work, where that can come in and just questioning.
So if we can give Rodney an opportunity to respond to some of this, because he's designing police stations all across the country. He knows what the latest trends are. He might be the best person in this room to address a question like that.
Sure. AI is coming into play in every aspect of our lives, not just policing, but every aspect of our lives. And it will have multiple changes that it causes. I don't think we're at a point right now, especially in the policing industry, which is a very hands-on, record-taking, record-following. You have to have paper trail for everything. You have to have, to meet accreditation standards and things like that, you have to do the right job. As far as I've seen, we discuss AI every day in our company. We discuss it with TLC, our security and technology partners that we work with, that we're working with on this project as well. And at present, I've seen no reduction in space because of AI technology in a police department. Does it allow the police department to do more with what they have? Sure, it absolutely does, because AI you can ask AI to do things and they can do it. But that doesn't mean you don't need the person to ask AI to do it. It's just doing it better and faster than we could do it by hand, but all those people are still required at present. And will that change? I have no idea. One day we'll have flying cars, but that's not in the foreseeable future that we could say we should diminish the physical square footage of a facility in hopes that in the future sometime the need's going to go lower, because we have to design for the worst and hope for the best. And at present, there's nothing that I've read, that I've seen, that I've researched, that I've written papers on that says AI will make any difference at all in the square footage or the size of the facility. It's just the way the facility will function. And will I need those words in 10 years? Maybe. I have no idea. But what if it goes the other way? Just like you're saying, there are too many unknowns out there that I don't believe it's prudent to base the design of such an important facility on such an unknown factor. I don't see that as, when looking at it from a policing standpoint. And Chief, I'd love to have your comment on this. looking at it from a policing standpoint, we're not at a point where we can say something in the future is going to be better, smaller, bigger, or worse.
I actually say that AI may actually cause us to have an increase of needed space.
It
For
could be,
example,
yeah.
a real-time intelligence center, which is driven by a lot by AI, you need to have a space to run that,
That's right.
which you need to accommodate.
And the technology to run it, and the backbone in the technology to run it, it can be expanded so that it can work. So, I mean, these are all things that we deal with every single day, but I don't, there's not like a magic bullet out there. AI or any other technology that I know of that's going to decrease the amount of space that we would need today.
The
And
efficiencies with
probably
AI will
more.
be saving us time in investigations, but not necessarily.
Exactly. You can do your job faster, but that doesn't mean it takes up less space or anything else. Yeah.
The second part of the question, which I didn't get to, was we're talking about needs in 2044. How did we look at Portsmouth 20 years from now? What data did you use to come up with? Because there are two schools of thought. Are we going to be increasing the population so we need more space, or are we not going to have to? So I'm curious on what your 2044 estimates, what did you base it on?
We looked at population growth, we looked at the influx of visitors and things like that, which is a big thing in Portsmouth. You have a lot of people coming in to visit. We looked at how your housing and things like that are expanding and growing. And we looked at modern day policing needs, which your present police department does not have. And so when we start adding all that up, I don't want to say this is a bare bones program, but it's not an elaborate program where we threw space at a problem because we had to increase it for 20 years. That's not how we do things. We base everything on information that we can receive. And some of the best information we can get is from the chief, who knows exactly how his department runs, what spaces he needs to do the work, and where those spaces need to be located to be most efficiently productive for the spaces. And
That could be true, but you also got to keep in mind what happens with cost increases as the amount of building increases. So we knew it didn't pass before. I don't want to see us expanding, sort of what Councilman Cook said, we're expanding the square footage. That just doesn't make sense.
Well, I think that the way we're looking at this, and I believe I spoke on this before, but the way we're looking at this is that by bringing this into a 2 or 3 tiered program where we're looking at municipal facilities as well as police facilities as well as maybe the schools, which really we don't have anything to do with. We're looking hard at that to see, and I think that by taking all 3 of those in, we're finding efficiencies, which shows in the program that Richard's presented. Where the chief is willing and has, we've gone through every single space in the police department program, and we've asked the chief, can this be a shared space? Can this be a shared space? And there's a tremendous amount of them that cannot, because they're police-only functions. And the security would be breached if they were shared with other people that didn't have the proper security clearances. I'm sure everyone understands that. The police need a certain level of security that an accountant in the finance department doesn't need. And we have to keep, because of protocols, we have to keep certain people out, even if they have a security level that will let them into certain portions of the building. They can't go into other portions. There are portions of the building that the chief can't really go into unless he's going with somebody else. So
I want to clarify one statement you just made. You said you're not involved in the school department right now. You are going to be assessing the amount of square footage they currently use in this building?
That's,
So, no.
I'm
That's
sorry,
JSA.
I was speaking to ADG only.
Yes.
JSA is in charge of
So
the
if I
city
may,
hall and
yes,
if I may,
we are.
the last time around, we had a 30,000 square foot addition with 19,000 square feet of renovations. That's 49,000 square feet. We're currently at 47, of which 4,000 is shared. So by my reckoning, we've actually come down a bit. And I'm not, and I'm just trying to to get perspective here. The goal, the number's gonna go, we gotta get the adjacencies and the priorities put together and then come back, and I think we can have a more productive conversation.
Right, and I'm comparing it to the matrix. Matrix came in lower than that. And so we've gone from matrix back up some.
But Matrix didn't include all the spaces that were needed. That's what we're hearing.
Well, the matrix didn't include it was mostly the shared space, the 4,000 square feet that we're talking about that matrix didn't include. If you go through here and look.
Can you repeat
shared
what it was
space.
at Matrix? Because some of them were
And some of it-
mechanical.
Yeah, some of those actual
It's
spaces.
records and auxiliary.
Yeah,
We
Yeah,
try,
look at.
so that we're,
critical pieces.
let's
One
not
person
get,
talk at a time, please.
let's not get dragged down into this amount of square feet. I mean, this is a preliminary number. And, I'm willing to accept it as a preliminary number, subject to change based on information we don't have today, which is the municipal and the school components. And I think we need to do that as a committee to go forward. I think we need to accept this as a preliminary number for the police department. It doesn't lock it in. I'm not locking into anything. But I think to provide some progress, we need to do that, or something like that.
If I could, this is great, vigorous discussion. And I think the committee is doing what it should do, which is challenge numbers and seek to understand. I think you're right though, Rick, that at some point we have to say, this is the best number we have for now,
Subject to change.
subject to change. If I could, I haven't had a chance to ask questions. In terms of IT, looks like we added some space for IT. My experience was at Seacoast Media Group in 2007, we built a very large server room, and by 2015, we didn't need it. We needed about 1/4 of it. So have we looked, maybe this is a question for EG, have we looked at cloud computing and how much that will take over your IT needs before we start building space for that?
we rely on our technology consultants to outline the technology requirements of the future. We have not heard on any project that we've done, 450 to date, that the technology component and the size of I understand what you're saying about the server room. It used to be server rooms were gigantic, and I understand I worked on several projects where the server room was diminished because it didn't need to be as large as it was. A lot of that had to do with the size of the actual equipment that goes in there. A lot of it had to do with the size of the mechanical systems that had to go into the room, have all gotten smaller. But the need for that technology has not gone down, and it's just that, and we've reached a very efficient way of doing things. Now, if everything goes to a cloud-based system, I guess you could get rid of server rooms. I guess you could get rid of some mechanical space because you don't need as much mechanical if you don't have the server rooms. But I don't think we're at a point in the construction industry and the technology industry to be able to say for sure that that's the case. And if so, what that reduction might look like. I think it was a gigantic reduction from the past to the present, but you're not going to have that same percentage of reduction from now into the future, because not only are maybe the requirements for space getting a little smaller, but the programs that are available that might want that, like the real-time crime center, the real-time information center the chief just mentioned, utilizing something like that actually is going to add space to the technology requirements. It's not going to diminish space from the technology requirements. So there are programs coming in. If we're going to have a significant drone program, then that needs technology behind it, and that's going to need a place in those rooms to live. In the future, I don't know. I'm not a technology engineer or security engineer. I work with them, and I have worked with them for the last 20 years. But we do very different things. We design buildings, and they keep their nose to the ground, sniffing for ways to make technology better, faster, stronger, and smaller. And we've come leaps and bounds, but I can't say that it's going to keep going at this downward scale, because at some point it has to plateau and possibly even go back up again, like someone said just a little while ago.
Okay.
I think it's hard to put your eggs in that basket and say, well, let's just go ahead and cut out, not give space to what needs space today, because it might not need space tomorrow.
I would say to that, to your point about oversized large server rooms, there aren't any of those in this program. The IT room that's shown is
That really answers my question.
160 square feet, which is very normal. So there's none that are very large. I would also
10,000 square foot server room, Jason.
I'd also make the point too that even with cloud computing, it's, I think, fair to say that there might always be a need for infrastructure on site because of the critical functions the police department provides. Just like in a hospital, even if it's in the cloud, you have servers on site that even if all of that goes down, you can still access that information. That's so I would hesitate to think that those could go away.
Right. That answers my question. And the other question I had was, if we're looking at supply rooms as slightly larger to be offices, but the value of the matrix report was really getting future headcount, and we amplified the headcount a little bit to be conservative. Those seem to be opposing assumptions that we need additional office spaces on top of a pretty well vetted headcount number.
Now, I see your point. That's a fair statement to make. And certainly when it comes to laying it out, maybe we say, do you know what? We feel comfortable with the head count, and we're going to compromise on reducing that storage room space because we feel comfortable with the head count, and to make it all fit within the parameters that we have, that's where we're going to take the square footage out of. That's fair, and that might be a decision we ultimately made. That being said, it is nice that if we can accommodate it, it gives us a hedge against the unknown of the future, because projections are projections. They're our best estimated guesses into the future that we may or may not know. If we might find that, the cybercrime, that suddenly with AI coming, proliferating, that there's a lot more of that, and now we need more people. That gives us a hedge for those unknowns. So I would agree those statements are a bit in opposition, and that might be where we can find reductions to help keep square footage down, but it does also give us flexibility and a hedge against the unknowns.
Yeah. Yes. Mary Lou, you have
Well, Peter made a comment about priorities, and, we're here because basically the police department needs work. And we haven't heard that from the other departments, so it'll be interesting when you do that sort of audit of the other departments within this building, because the priorities, to me, would be the police department at this point. But we have to figure that out. How do we work within that space? And how do we manage the space that the police department cannot use?
Yes, Kate.
You have to understand, we're talking about pennies here, and it's very important to us because it's not our money. It's the taxpayer money. So when we're talking about inches, pennies make dollars. It's going to add up. So when we start to really go after you and say this, I'm not ready to check. The city is. we don't have a lot of money and we're trying to make it as efficient as we can and to keep the safety of this city. So please bear that in mind when
You're doing your due diligence as
Right, okay.
as representatives of the Portsmouth community.
Okay,
That's why we're all here.
That's why. Councilor Cohen.
I just wanted to also note this question about IT server storage space. Between that and storage for things like cleaning supplies and other storage, because the police department is staying on this location, that changes that calculation a little bit more. And I didn't see it highlighted as shared space, but it's the kind of thing that we can be talking about is a larger server shared space for all the departments to share within City Hall, which maybe cuts down on, the HVAC equipment that you need for cooling for a space like that, but also a larger storage space for things like cleaning supplies, that they wouldn't need a separate cleaning closet if you have the same custodial staff that's dealing with the whole building. Whereas, some of those calculations are still in here from when we were talking about an independent building, and we're not talking about that now.
And I think once the city side is established of what the needs are, we'll see that shared space grow because we'll be able to identify more adjacencies, more things that could be shared. And part of the hope is why we're going to the city side is to identify how we could make that a better customer interaction, citizen interaction, so that way we free up spaces that could essentially meet this need without necessarily constructing new spaces. So I think that those are all the unknowns, but that's part of the hope of this is where can we find reconfiguration? Because once it's a sort of, like you saw with the Bangor, or a point of service model, and citizens aren't wandering through the entire building, there are wings that can be repurposed in a much different way, so that you may see a much different equation. But we've got to get through the city side first to then really have a full understanding of what does it look like as a whole. But I think we really have an eye towards that shared space. My sense will be over time will grow. We'll find more and more of that as we just get through the rest of the details on the city side.
Yeah, I was just gonna say also, though, I think it's important to remember, we haven't heard from the city on what they need and they want, and part of that is that is a very difficult political calculus for any city manager to come forward and say, we need new space for City Hall. That is always gonna be the last part of the city government that asks for anything and the last part that gets it. So, just because that's challenging politically. And so, when I first started as a city councilor 4 years ago, the kitchen on the 4th floor where the city manager's office is was the original kitchen from the building of this hospital, when it was a hospital. Now, every other space in the city had been redone. But that's why in the city hall parts of the building, we still see tiles that should have been replaced many, many years ago, abatement that should have been done, because that's gonna be the last area that anybody asks for improvements.
Good point. Just a time check, we've gone over an hour carrying this out. We do want to update on the next steps. Do you want to wrap up the discussion on police square footage?
Are we now saying that, okay, we're good for now with where we are with police square footage? Now our next step is the municipal side? Yeah, I mean, are we?
Well, we've had 1, 2, 3, 4 members ask some challenging questions, but
I guess maybe it's a process thing. I mean, I think, not to put words in Rick's mouth, but I'm going to try and do that anyway. I think what Rick was saying is, okay, right now we got an estimate that we've reconciled ADG and Matrix. We got an estimate that is the best we can come up with now about the police square footage. The next step is to get an estimate about municipal square footage. I understand, based on the challenging questions, I understand that, who knows, the police square footage, once we get the municipal square footage or the school square footage, it may change. Once we get to costing it out, the police square footage, the municipal square footage might change, but having been police commissioner for 4 years, much of the time we've been talking about a new police facility. Speaking of political difficulties in asking for more space, I think we just need to keep moving forward rather than, I don't want to keep, before we take the next step, have another conversation about police square footage, if that makes sense.
Well, since you put words in my mouth, I'll explain what I was saying. I'm ready to accept these as preliminary numbers, but I expect to revisit them based on when we get other information in the future that we don't have today. So, I moved my son to Boston recently, and I said I want to make one trip. So let's start loading the truck. And he had to make some decisions at the end because everything didn't fit. It's kind of like the same process. We'll see what happens.
What are you going to do with the square footage she freed up at home, too?
That's for me.
Just to pick up on what you just said, and that's how we're presenting this number to you as well on this sheet. We know that number will change. In the needed square footage column, we expect to update you every month with this sheet, and it's gonna be a ticker. And yes, we want it to go down as well, but it's gonna be a snapshot as the design develops. We're gonna go through all the phases of design. Conceptual design, schematic design, design development, and those numbers are gonna change. So if the committee can accept that this number is what we believe we need right now, it's not stating that this is what it will be. It's simply stating, to the best of our ability, we've gone through this process multiple times, and we've tried to pare the number down lower and lower. And this is the number that represents that at this time. We're not asking for you to approve this as the final square footage number. Yeah, that's it.
I understand it as that, and I wouldn't accept a proposal to say this number of square feet is what you need, period, let's move on to the next thing and try to make it fit, because that's not where we're at. But we have to move forward, I think, and, you've gone through the process, and that's all I'm saying, is that we have a good preliminary number for the police department. Let's see how other things come together. That's my opinion, and Kate doesn't agree with me.
Yeah. Well, I think that in an ideal world, this is the number that you get to with unlimited budgets, right? But we don't know what the budget is, and so we don't know what the end result is. So I think this is the ideal if we have, if we can just say we can afford all of it. But I don't know that that's the case. So I'm not willing to say, yes, this is where we're gonna end up. And I think that means that we're gonna have some tough decisions down the road.
This is a start. And I think if I can just pick up on something that Peter said earlier, if you want to talk about where we were talking about, let's make it simple, 50,000 square feet, 30,000 new construction, 20,000, renovation. We know that new construction is the most expensive thing to do. So one of the things I think we're going to end up trying to do is reduce that new construction and have more renovation. So that will bring us to where we need to be, as opposed to thinking how much, comparing size just on a size to size comparison. We're not there. We're going to be ending up in a situation where the size obviously is important, but where that comes from, whether it's new construction or renovation, will have a significant impact on the final number.
To add to just this number is not the ideal number for the police department, just to be clear. That ideal number is long ago history.
Years ago.
Yeah, so let's not overstate what this number is. There have been a lot of compromises that have played out to get to just this number.
Our square footage with money no being issued started at 72,000 square feet, went down to 47.
Yeah.
It's significant.
Okay, so
That's good.
next steps.
We beat that to death.
So next steps to the point, to get to that stage where we can make those decisions, we are working on the city side to understand what those needs are, what are the pain points, what are the opportunities to improve, efficiencies for staff, efficiencies for the public, better public facing, right? So we are in the midst of meetings right now. We had a kickoff with department heads last week. We had our first meeting this morning, and we have roughly four meetings a week for the next 3 weeks, with a few to still be scheduled. That'll be our first round. We will likely have a second round with most of the departments or follow-ups to make sure that we understood what we first heard and ask follow-up questions. At that point, we'll be able to start laying things out and seeing what's going to work and how we can make those work. Peter.
That doesn't mean that we can't have a meeting and you can bring us up to date on the departments you've talked to.
Oh yeah, no, that's completely fair. No, I wasn't going to disappear into the abyss for a period and say, hey, here it is.
Yeah.
No.
No, I think, going a month without a meeting doesn't help anybody.
But if we meet in a month, we will be at the point that we have met with all of the departments conceivably.
All right, so let's schedule the next meeting for the 15th.
Well, is that how the committee feels?
I'm not available.
15th of what?
Of October, I'm not available.
You just said once a month. The 15th is 15 days.
It also may,
2 weeks.
I guess the committee should decide what you feel is appropriate necessary. What I can say is in roughly a month, we should have met with all of the city departments and we'll have had our first pass with everyone. We will be meeting with them again, but at that point, we'll have our first preliminary understandings of what are the opportunities on the
I
municipal
think
side.
the cadence of the interviews with departments, if you schedule it in a month, you'll have some substance to review instead of, if you don't, you won't have as much to really talk about. In a month, you'll have more to talk about and it'll be substantive.
I just want to say this is a lot of staff time that we're committing. If you look at the number of staff members here and consulting time, that we want to make sure that we have a substantial amount to discuss if we're meeting. I think that that's critical.
Should we meet after the municipal stuff is gathered, or should we wait until the school is also gathered?
The municipal is, the city side is part of the schools. You'll have all that comprehensively
So
together.
that, in a month, we'll have all of that.
We'll have the first pass with all of them, so we're, from sort of our standpoint, the school is part of the municipal. However, the community categorized, so we have a meeting scheduled with the school.
4 weeks would be 28 days, so the 29th would be 4 weeks from today.
Yeah.
I move we meet on the 29th.
Is there a second?
I would suggest that we go into November and make it the first week of
I'd say the 5th, which is a week after the 29th, November 5th.
Yeah, go. Jump up to the next month.
Counselors are pretty bleary-eyed on the 5th, but
That's
Still be here.
maybe if we're still here.
Wednesday after Election Day.
As are the
Still
police.
live for at least a month.
okay. Fine, first one in October's fine with, in November's fine with me.
From our standpoint, either is appropriate. Where right now we're looking at having our last meeting scheduled the week of the 20th through the 24th. So we will have gotten through all the departments by either of those weeks. So whatever.
Carl, any thoughts?
Can we just make one request?
I think it would be helpful that they can digest through it and deliver that and have some substance to deliver. So I think the 5th is better.
Fifth is more reasonable.
The next
Fifth is
meeting,
fine.
the next meeting in November is scheduled for November 12th, so it's either stick with the 12th or move to the 5th.
Yeah, I'm exaggerating on the 5th. Maybe it'll be an early night.
Who knows?
Are we, what date do we decide on?
The 5th,
The 5th of November?
5th?
that works for you too?
Okay, I would request that material be sent out to the committee no later than the Friday before the meeting.
Yes, I think delaying it till the 5th helps with that because right now we were working hard to get this to you in a timely fashion. So that, I think moving it to the 5th is helpful to get it to you on the
10/31.
31st.
Yeah, 31st.
And for some of us, you better give us some ink toner and copy paper.
Okay, so
3
November,
o'clock,
next meeting, November 5, 3 o'clock, and pack it out on the Friday preceding.
Okay.
Second? Very good.
Any new business?
Public comment?
Excellent comment.
I just have a quick request that when that open or report or commentary, if you could make some printed copies available for the public to pick up at city clerk or whatever, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Somebody on
Do that?
is North Sturda.
Oh, that's with JSA.
Guys, okay,
That's
okay.
I know. Any other business? All right.
Move adjourned.
Thank you.
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
Everybody, this whole time.